it seems to ring and sometimes it doesn't. But you can always see it if you go into the Hangout and have the little things up, because you'll see it there as a call that you can just join with the arrow thing. Even if it doesn't actually make a sound, it should be there. So anyway, what do you want to do today? Any questions or sharing?
You mind, Henry, if I ask a question?
No.
Okay.
Well, yeah. I had an experience with our group, our bench of three, that was quite intriguing, and I've had several encounters since where it's been different. But when we get engaged in the Spirit, we stepped into the river, walked into the river, deep into the river, and came to this underground doorway that you had to walk through. We got into this place, and we ended up what we believe was the eye of the Lord. And he had us just sit down and observe, and it was like being in a gyroscope, where you got to see in, it was, you know, hard to explain this, every different direction. While we sat there, we felt like the next time we got together, we were going to be able to see. Well, since then, whenever I've had encounters in that certain place, I've had eagles come pick me up, chariots come pick me up, but I'm seeing from his perspective. It's like I'm seeing from the eye of the Lord. And I've searched out the scriptures for eye, and I don't have a lot of reference to that whole encounter where you're actually seeing from. I am seeing from the perspective of the Lord. I can feel His heart. I can feel His movement, but I'm in the eye of the Lord. Have you ever had that, Mike?
Well, whenever I engaged around the Ark of the Presence of God and I step into Him, then I have the same experience. I'm looking to see from His perspective, and I can go into His heart from there. I can speak out of His mouth from there. So that experience for me is a daily one around the Ark. So the sort of the lion, ox, eagle, man, the four faces of God, the governmental perspective of it. I look to engage that every day. So I look to see, and you can go back into eternity, into what was, into His heart from there. That's been my perspective. Whether there's a relational connection pathway to that, where it's more about the relational aspect and intimacy and knowing and seeing things without necessarily the governmental side of it. I always engage it in the governmental side. So it's always about, okay, what am I supposed to administrate from kingly perspective or prophetic or apostolic, priestly? That's my engagement, because we're in Him, so we can step into Him and be in His name, so it always carries His power of attorney. But I can't say that. Actually, yes. There was a place where I went into a pool in the Father's garden, and I went down deeper than I've ever been. I ended up into His heart, which sounds more what you're describing. You describe it as the eye.
Yeah, because it wasn't.
Yeah.
Well, when we got down into that place, we did go through these chambers.
Yeah.
And as a matter of fact, it was flowing red. I just didn't know where I was, but we ended up in His eye. But from that place, like when I was picked up by this eagle, I was taken to the heights over the earth and set me on my mountain, and I began. I don't know if it was my mountain, but it was a mountain overlooking North America, and I began to prophesy. So maybe that's kind of similar to what you did. I don't know. It's just been a little while ago, and I haven't gone back there, which I probably should.
Yeah.
But I was looking for someone to ask about it.
Yeah, I can definitely relate to going deeper into this pool and going into His heart. and it was a very emotional feeling and experience, and almost like his thoughts. And for me,
Right.
like we all have different ways of engaging and different things that will relate to us, and it's just tuning into them and, okay, what is it? What's that engagement for? And symbolically, if you're coming out of the place of his heart and seeing from his perspective, then when you go to a higher place, you can begin to ministrate differently. I definitely do things very differently than what I used to do, simply because I've engaged in that place of his heart and what was, and knowing his eternal perspective from something, rather than my sort of figuring out something from a natural perspective, or even sometimes a spiritual one, but knowing what it was like originally in his intention, the intentions of his heart. That definitely changes how you call things into being or prophesy over things, because you're coming out of almost like the counsel of God and his eternal perspective, which is very different. Um, so yeah, go back and engage some more, and see what happens the next time. If it becomes a sort of a pathway that you can engage on, it's definitely something that is for you, and maybe the way that
Well,
God engages you in that way. So yeah.
well, again, it was when we were in the bench of three,
Yeah.
that we first experienced that. When I went back, again, it's been almost a month now. When I went back, that's when the eagle came and picked me up, and I was seeing like out of the eye of the eagle.
Yeah.
And it was a very governmental thing. It was, I went up there, and I was given a different mantle, different garment. I was completely, the angels dressed me differently, and so what I did, and what I proclaimed over. Unfortunately, I'm not a very good writer either, so I haven't got that habit yet. So if I was better at that, I'd be reading what I wrote. Anyway.
Sure. I mean, yeah, it does. I mean, I journal everything, so when anything is sort of anything that I journal it, so it gives me a reference to go back and re-engage or remember, or just have a record of what I've spoken or called into being or things. But I know it can be quite. I got used to doing it while I'm in the engagement, so it doesn't break
Oh,
the
wow.
flow. But I know that can be quite difficult for some people. They're in it and whoa, and then it's like afterwards it's like they haven't got time to necessarily jot everything down or write it down, and then it's sort of easily sort of gone from your memory in that sense. But
Right.
yeah, I've sort of learned just to write as I go. Yeah, I've got a note tablet thing that just produces a text file, and it just gets saved into Evernote, so I can copy it out into files. And so I've got sort of journals and files, and anything governmental I pull out and put into a separate file. So I've just got a list of the governmental things that I've done and said, so I can always go back and refer to them. So it's quite useful, but it's not easy for everyone to do that. But I learned how to do it by not being distracted by writing, and just carried on and just wrote down what I was doing and what I was saying. So yeah,
Must be you're an engineer, right?
well,
Isn't your background kind of mathematical,
no,
analytical?
well, I was a biochemist, so yeah, it was more scientific stuff rather than engineering stuff. But yeah, it was. I just had to practice everything. That was the thing. The first time I had my encounters, it took me hours to write out them afterwards because there was so much in them. And after a while, I couldn't do it. And so I thought, we'll have to find a different way. So I just, in my engagements in intimacy in the garden, and particularly in sort of the green pastures type engaged with the shepherd, I would just begin to write down his thoughts, and talk to him and write out the thoughts that came back to me as I was getting them. And as I developed that more and more, then I was able to do the same thing when I was actually doing something in an encounter or having an encounter. I just started writing, and it just became something I could do just because I practiced it. But yeah.
Right. Yeah. I'm lazy that way, but I think I'm gonna have to. It's the artist in me. I want to just pick up a new color.
Well, the other thing is, get a dictaphone and just record it. You know.
Actually, I have no excuse. I've got one of these new Apple watches that you can do that with. I just haven't figured it out yet.
Well, see, there you go. It's all there for you.
I know. Anyway, that's yeah. The thing with our bench of three is we were just having amazing encounters, and then all of a sudden everybody goes on vacation, and it becomes very difficult to get together in summertime, apparently.
All right.
But
Okay.
yeah, I want
Well,
to
how
be
much vacations do you all get? I didn't think you had many vacations in the US.
It's not me. It's the ladies that I'm engaging with.
I see.
Lou's been in California for 3 weeks.
Okay.
And Pamela and Steve are buying houses right and left and having to fix them up. So that bench of three has been a game changer for me. It's just amazing how connected we are, and a lot of people in our church that have been involved in a bench of three, they communicate the same thought that the minute they step in together, they have encounters that they never would alone.
Okay.
So it's been a really big blessing for us.
Yeah.
Anyway,
Hmm.
so go ahead. I don't want to dominate. You have something, Henry? See there?
I think Mike was getting ready to say something. Were you
No,
going to say
I was
something,
just
Mike?
going to say, yeah, I mean, you can see an exponential or a multiplication when we come together at times. Corporately that works. I guess with the bench, there's no reason why, that connection shouldn't, open up something. Because in a sense, you're engaging in something corporately, governmentally together. So, yeah, I mean, it's great. I mean, it's a great testimony. It's great that it's working that way for you. So what are you actually doing? When you engage, are you just, is there encounters, or are you getting any sort of legislation or mandates or particular things that you do, or is it, what's the sort of gist of what you're...
Well, the protocol has been one of us kind of takes the lead, and we just start wherever our imagination goes. So we just kind of, first of all, always wait on the Lord, and then he just takes hold of us, and then the minute one starts to go there, we all go there. But usually we're, like one time we did a prison break in Iraq. We went into a prison where some Christians had been taken captive, where I started speaking in whatever language that was, Arabic, whatever, and we led them to buses, and we've been in Russia, we've been all over the world where God just uses us to do these things. We've been on safaris and taken Bibles to missionaries in Africa. We've done all kinds of things. We've done some repentance for the Native Americans across the United States. I think I mentioned that one to you. I mean, we just kind of avail ourselves to the Lord, and He takes us to these places. Oftentimes we find ourselves on a mountain, and we have this, it's a book that as we begin to prophesy and make declarations, the writing appears on this book. So we're actually creating, legislation when we get on our mountain. I mean, it's all new to us, but we're just kind of going with it. But we just kind of go for it. And
yeah, sounds great.
That's what happens. It's a blast. I mean,
Yeah.
we were on a steeple in Russia one time in this neighborhood, and like, what in the world are we doing here? And we just started prophesying, and the whole town changed. Angels appeared, and there was this oppression, this demonic spirit that was just broken over this town in Europe, and I don't know. It's exciting.
Yeah. Well, it is. I mean, you can do so much more than you can do in the limits of just your general praying. You can engage anywhere, anytime, any place. Beyond time and space. If also, and it's like, it's great. So, yeah.
Well, we all feel like we can actually do anything we want to do, but now, we're just really learning how to. Well, I'm talking with you. It's just like second nature. Yeah. It's something you've been doing for so long, but for us, it's just so exciting. It's like honeymoon stage. I mean, it's just so fun, and we get to do so many things. It's all brand new. And having the three of us have such completely different giftings and personalities that when we get together, we're able to articulate and do things that we could never do in that realm alone. So we really have a blast.
Yeah, I think so. Great. Okay. Okay, Henry, have you got something you want to share or testify to?
Well, I had listened to the hangout when you were with Peter in Georgia, and you guys were in the hot tub, and somebody had said something about meeting themselves before they were, when they were kind of the picture in God's eye, and you said, well, we could go back there and have a look at that. And so anyway, I was listening to that, and I thought, well, wow, that sounds like a really good idea. So I sat down and did it, and so that was kind of good. That was really good. That was kind of interesting. I didn't look the way I thought it was gonna. I don't know what I thought, but so anyway, I began engaging that part of me on that figure eight, the infinity, the one was, and so I started engaging like with this and running that part of me like on that track on that track and I don't know how to describe it, but it was like I ran that thing around there in such a way that it was kind of like raising my vibration. So like as I would run that thing, it started going faster and faster, and it started raising the vibration or the frequency. And I ended up, I don't know if it was my spirit or what happened, but I ended, as the vibration raised, I ended up like seated over the timeline and being able to look like from all perspectives all at the same time, which I thought was really profound, like so significant. It's like I need to spend some time and develop this because it was very interesting because I ended up like connected with my spirit man seated over time, and I could view in any direction on this timeline from outside of that place, and and so I just wanted to share that as a testimony. Oh, and the other thing was, so I decided to put colors in it. So I put the colors in the figure eight of the seven spirits of the Lord, and I'm running this guy like around the track with the seven colors in it, and then that's um, when I had like everything kind of like shifted. And so when I came out of the encounter, I had looked on Facebook, and they had it was the night that the first night they put the picture of the White House with the rainbow on it, and I thought, wow, that's really great confirmation. And so, I know a lot of people had different ideas about all of that, but for me, after having the encounter and then seeing that and just flipping it on there, I was just going, oh wow, God, this is really great. So anyway,
Yeah. Yeah, pretty good. Yeah, I mean, there's a whole lot for us to learn from this engaging in what was, whether you're going back into the heart of God or going back into that eternal womb where He created you, or where all some of His thoughts are. To just know ourselves in true identity from that eternal perspective does change how we view what will be and how we view what is. Because it's just, for me, when I started doing that and looking at, okay, this is what I look like, rather than it being a physical, so, okay, I look like this physically, it was like, no, this is how God sees me. This is the perspective of His heart for me as a son, how He created me to be in sonship. And it was quite transformational, because it began to shape then what my spirit started to do. It wasn't cognitive in that, oh yeah, here's all the some of the thoughts that God has about me, but when I was standing in them and they were like going off around me like lightning bolts of electricity and thought, my spirit engaged it. I mean, I couldn't, it was too much cognitively to engage, but my spirit did, and I did find myself different, or my spirit just knowing more about who it really was and what God's purpose was for me, and that really did change how I began to administrate spiritually, because I knew that I was supposed to do things, rather than sometimes it'll be, okay, God, should I do this and should I do that? It was almost like connecting up with the very thoughts of God just released me to do it. And so I try and engage there every day, just to go back into what was, and just to look forward from what was, and just see, okay, everything's going to come out of this perspective today. And then when I begin to administrate or call things or decree or declare, so it's like I've engaged the oracles of God for my life, and what I'm engaged with governmentally, and it just frees me to say things. I mean, I've been decreeing and declaring things over the last few months that I would have never done before. I would have never had the boldness to do it. I would have almost had to think, this is what I'm going to do, and then if I thought about it, I wouldn't have done it. So my spirit just began to flow out of that, and it was just a holy boldness of like, this is who I am, which was a change, so I love stepping into the four faces of God and being in Him, and recently it's all been about the lion, just been like order and order. Everything's been like order, bring order. I'm like, well, okay. But then you go back into, well, what is that order? Because it's just nothing like where we are. Um, God's purpose, obviously, because He never intended it to be like this. So everything then begins to change from that perspective, and you begin to bring order in what you say and what you see. And you can see things that are out of order, and you can see things differently. Like you're saying, you're sitting on the timeline. It's almost like seeing things from a totally different perspective of now, but in a sense, it's now for God. Um, it's eternity for us, but it's now for God. So, yeah, I certainly it's a place I began to try and develop more in engagement with. So, yeah, awesome.
Yeah, there's a symbol from the book of Zohar or something like that. And I think they call it celestial man or something like that. And he's basically kind of standing there like it's almost like he's holding the hula hoop, but the hula hoop is like the universe, and it's around him, and his arms are out. And that encounter reminded me of that. I'm like, I've seen this. And so I was like looking at those, and I thought, well, that's it, because when the eight is actually kind of circular, but there's the appearance
Yeah.
that, but it's kind of got, anyway. It was kind of, and I thought, well, I've seen a picture of this someplace, because I'm really good with symbols, and it's like I'm able to remember a lot of different symbols and imagery that I've seen at other times. It's like when I see it again, it's like I can really track with that stuff. And so I pull this thing up, and I'm looking at it, and it's like, this is it. But that's one of the symbols that they have in the book of Zohar, and some of the Jewish mystics and stuff talked a little bit about this. I thought, well, I think this is really great. But it gave me kind of a little bit of a reference point. I thought, okay, well, this isn't something new. Where God's beginning to reveal some things that have been hidden, and maybe, they've had at different times before. But it's always nice for me when I'm able to at least have some kind of a reference, a reference point. And listening to you in the Hangouts, and even I've been listening to a lot of Peter's lately, and it's like Peter's really awesome. I get something out of almost every one of their Hangouts, and he talks about, we're all talking about the same material, but from his perspective, almost every time I've listened to him, I always get something that's really significant out of what he says that I'm able to go back to, and then kind of move into and be able to glean from that. So
Yeah.
I think that's really good.
Yeah. Yeah, I found that sort of figure of eight covenant walk-in it's like a three-dimensional. We often try and draw things one-dimensionally, but when they're multi-dimensional, or and so it's like you can see the end from the beginning because they're shifted so that it's not flat. So I'm looking at what I'm standing in what was, but I can see what is, because it's actually not flat. So it's a dimensional thing that you can actually see. So I always sort of stand there, but I'm always looking from there forward, and then I can walk what I see in what is, so I can begin to create and declare it. If you can see the end from the beginning, what you do and what is totally different. I think I just could never figure it out from the perspective of a circle. It was always, I struggled to think, well, if I'm at the end, the beginning, I keep going round and round in circles. I don't want to go round in circles. So this was a much more useful sort of symbol for me to understand that I'm continually moving, but I'm always going from what was into what is, and because I can see it from the beginning and see the end, and therefore begin to make decisions and decrees so that the end will match the beginning, and then it always goes back again. So yeah, it's a really interesting experience, because it's like we're talking about our experiences in a symbolic way that are reflected by certain symbols, or certain patterns. And some people sort of find certain patterns are things they relate to. That one made real sense to me when I first began to experience it. Now it's a daily part of my life and relationship is to go back and engage in eternity with God, in His heart. Yeah. Mm.
I've done something like this about 20 years ago when I got myself just kind of engaged in a whole bunch of different stuff, and none of it was really right, but it was kind of a similar framework to what we're doing. And I was just on the other side, and I'd gotten so loaded up with everything and kind of mad one day, and so I decided to well, I can never like become anything other than what God created me to be to begin with, and this whole idea that I'm whatever these weird ideas that I've been having or people are saying about this stuff. If God's really God, then I can never be more than He ever like imagined or created me to be to begin with. And so I went to the beginning, to the alpha, like grabbing a jumper cable, and I went to that end, and I took a hold of that thing, and then I went to the other end, to the omega, and I grabbed a hold of that thing, and I kind of like put the jumper cables on into these jumper cables on me, and just kind of started coming into agreement, like with this notion that he had a plan for me, that I was never going to be any more, any less than that anyway, and I hooked these things like to me like the jumper cables, and just kind of like blew all the rest of the stuff off me like dust with all these false doctrines and all this stuff, and just kind of like blasted everything off. But it was kind of like plugging into the timeline 20 years ago, but not ever hearing anything about it. And when I started doing that, it kind of I was like, because I remember it was like, wow, what was that? And my problem was that I didn't pursue it at that point, and I didn't really have any way of confirming what I'd experienced other than like, oh, something happened, but there wasn't anybody around. I could tell somebody, but nobody just really had anything like that. I had a lot of stuff. I just kind of shook out the bed sheets, from one end to the other. And so for me, with us here today doing this stuff, it's really a confirmation of something that I had like kind of almost leaned into in my spirit, before, and it's just kind of interesting.
Yeah.
All right, I better be quiet.
That's no problem. Yeah, so sure.
Mike?
Yeah.
I'm curious to hear, you get to encounter people in this, when God first asked you to do what you're doing and connect with different people in the Northwest and different four corners of the U.S., and you've been obedient. You have a different perspective because you're communicating with all these different people. What do you? How do I say this? How do you see things lining up? I mean, are people stepping into those roles? Are you Are you encouraged with what's going on?
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, see, I mean, this God has sort of engineered all this, really, because it's like I didn't know anybody in the Northwest at all. You know, a couple of years ago, it was like I knew nobody, didn't know, I didn't even know where the Northwest was. So it's like, you know, my geography of the US is not exactly hot. I had to go and have a look in the map and see, okay, it's up there. Because in my teenage or young when I was a kid, I mean, I used to love cowboy films, so things like the Oregon Trail and all that stuff. But I didn't know where Oregon was. I always thought it was further down south. So it was like when I thought, oh wow, this is where Oregon is. This is where the Oregon Trail went, all that sort of thing. So I initially it was Mike Lindell actually contacted me. I mean, that was the first engagement with the Northwest. He, for some reason, I can't even remember how, contacted me by email and just sort of said, "Oh, it'd be good. Could we talk?" And I just met up with him and had a chat, and it was like immediately I just felt something in my spirit just go off, and it was like, wow, there's something in this. So we just began meeting, and he invited a couple of his friends, from church, and then Mike Danforth came into that, and then that opened that up, and then all of a sudden, everywhere there were these connections being made, so God really did engineer it. But along the way, my heart just got really stirred, and I just knew there was something about the North and dealing with the North, and the government of God needed to be established there as a pattern. It was like just knew it in my heart. And then when I earlier in the beginning of the year saw this picture, and I was in the temple in heaven, and I saw these sort of interdimensional maps, and I got to fire these arrows. It was just like, oh wow, okay, and that then just began to develop and open up. And when I started to then look into it, because I then sort of thought, well, actually, I need to begin to look into the atmosphere and look into the area. Then God began to just release some things I needed to call out and whatever. So when the opportunity of coming over, I just knew it was God, and I knew it was an opportunity just to meet people in the flesh and just begin to engage that and engage God with it. And so I came with an agenda just to meet people, but with the desire that some governmental things would be out of it. So I was looking for people who had a heart for cities of refuge, or people who had a heart for engaging their area or their city. But of course, I didn't really know where I was going. When I came, it was just like, well, okay, here's here and here's here, and I'm just going to go and engage. But as a result of that, I've really felt, encouraged that people really stepped up to it. And as I began to talk to people and encourage them to, okay, what's the blueprint for your group? Why are you meeting? What is God's purpose for gathering? Is there something that you're missing, or have you not looked into it? And I found that people started to engage that, and then I started to see cities of refuge, and prophetically just things get released. I saw some things in the heavens with a waterfall and a spring, and I went to stay in a house that had a waterfall and a spring. And it was just like, hey, that's really cool. So it was like, and then when I started sort of sharing, and they were like, they just felt, yeah, that's a place for a city of refuge to be established. So there were a number of people who began just to, I think, catch hold of the whole issue of government and the need to begin to administer government, and not just go with the flow of whatever happens, but begin to shape the flow and bring things into the flow of God and into the purposes of God. So that was really good. So having sort of come back I was looking, okay, is there anyone who feels called to this region? And I'm not saying these are the only people called to the region, because there are benches that God will raise up, multiple ones. These are just the people that I engage with. But there were people who felt, yeah, we feel called. So in just blessing them and encouraging them, they've been beginning to meet, and I think they're sort of in different areas. I think from sort of the north and the south and the sort of the west, there still needs to be someone from the east to form a window. So there's this is the beginnings. But they've since then looked to establish benches up in the sort of Seattle area and engaging with a fort up there, and just God seems to be opening up doors of opportunity, and things are moving, which is all I was really looking to encourage, some movement. And I sort of continuing to hopefully engage with people and support them. I mean, for me, it's just like I'm just happy to facilitate. There's no organizational structure in this. There's just relationship of support and encouragement. I want to get alongside people. I'm not over people. I'm not under people. That I want to get
Right.
alongside and help walk this out. And encourage people to walk it out, and because you know God is raising up people with that level of authority in each of these areas. But I feel it's significant for the rest of the US that the North Gate gets established. And it was great for me that people came from other places into the North, particularly the Southwest. People came from San Diego and came from LA and Corba Linda, and people, they came up, and that made another connection, which now I'm working with them, hopefully, in the Southwest. And there was already this connection between the Southeast, with Peter down in Atlanta having connected with the group before I came. I thought, yeah, God is beginning to form this network of relationships and connections, to see the government of God established over the nation, and that becoming a pattern for other nations of seeing God outworking it. So I was really encouraged. It's early days, but really encouraged by that. There are decisions for people to make. They have to, are they going to pursue this? And there's opposition around, and I'm seeing quite a lot of it, and seeing how some of the enemy is trying to influence people and put people off and warn people off of going this route. But we've got to be ready to stand firm, in the light of that, and continue to pursue what God's doing. So, yeah, I was, very encouraged, in what God's doing and is continuing to do. So, yeah.
Yeah, I appreciate that perspective. I'm always I'm kind of a big picture guy, and so I always like to see things or look at it from the bigger picture. And I remember vividly the first time you talked about your map, and I saw it the minute you started to talk about it, the spirit, and what God wanted to do. And I'm much more mindful of a national thing that we're called to do, to, like you said, set up cities of refuge and to be the governmental voice of God, and to even the weather around us. We see rain occurring when we get together as a group and start declaring and mandating and prophesying. But we tend to get overwhelmed with life, and when we're together as groups, or when Mountaintop gathers at least, it's just awesome. It's wonderful. But developing a pattern and developing a habit, the discipline of life, to where that becomes the most important thing. Like yesterday, Mike is so almost desperate to encounter a higher level of the kingdom of God, that it's almost overwhelming him. He's been that way for a while, and Mike's such a forerunner. But I'm watching people just desire in a very unique way God, and to enter into that that place where they just, they're not satisfied with church. They're not satisfied with just worship. They're not satisfied with just prayer. That there's something greater going on, and I so desire to see people purposefully taking hold of the realm of government that's available to us, and it's hard. And so I really appreciate you doing what you're doing and encouraging, and yeah, but it's good.
Yeah, I think this hunger is really, I think, where people are beginning to just hear this sound of heaven. Their spirit is resonating with something. They know there's something more. They know there's a bigger picture, sonship, and the answer to the groan of creation. All that stuff, I think, is now just being released more and more. And those who are forerunning in it are just pursuing, and others are just seeing what's going on. I think they're noticing something's changed. There's a shift in the atmosphere, and they're being drawn towards it. I think that's it. A lot of people don't know what it is, but they know there's something, and I think God wants people there ready to be able to help and encourage those people who don't know what it is, but know something. Hey, this is what it is. This is that. This is what you're feeling. Something in your spirit is engaging with this, and we're on the journey together, and we're looking to pursue this. So let's get together, and let's pursue, and let's just engage and see what happens. I think gone are the days where we need to sort of have an agenda for everything. We need to engage God, and He'll give us in the relationship everything we need. We don't need to figure it all out before we do anything. We need to pursue Him, and He will help us and engage us on the way. And I think that's where people have to let go of preconceived ideas, old patterns, old ways of doing things, ways that we've been familiar with for years, but really haven't done the job. It hasn't changed the world. So why do we keep doing the same old thing, expecting different results? Well, we're in a time where the mantle is being passed, or God is taking the mantle and giving it, because I don't think it is being passed. Basically they don't want to pass it, but Moses actually, he passed the mantle to Joshua, and we really would like to see the whole older Moses generation actually pass the mantle, but they're not. So God is going to take the mantle and give it, so that we can go further. But we have to be willing to let go of the old wilderness ways, which is usually centered around one man doing the work and everyone else sort of, watching them do it. Whereas now it's all our responsibility. Yeah. Moses parted the Red Sea. Joshua got the people to step in carrying the ark of the presence of God, and the Jordan parted when they stepped in together with the presence of God in their midst. Completely different scenario, and I think that really sums up the difference between the old and the new. It's not just superstar ministers, apostles, prophets. God is calling and raising up a generation of people who are all able to engage and do whatever God's calling them to do together. And I think that's going to be so different. It's going to be so different from what we've been used to, and therefore we have to be willing to let go and take responsibility ourselves. It's not just that the leaders of the Moses generation want to stay on top of the mountain. A lot of people are very happy for them to be there because they don't want to take any responsibility for doing anything themselves. Very happy for everyone else to do it for them. I'll just tell us what to do and we'll do it. Whereas God is saying, no, you're all sons. You're all responsible as sons of God to embrace your destiny and to rule and to establish the kingdom. And in both areas, we need to see change. We need to see leaders who are willing to release people, and we need people who are willing to take responsibility to embrace who they are and what they're called to do. And we're in that crucial point where things are converging to see that taking place, and it's an exciting time.
33 days.
Yeah.
30 August 8th, right?
Yeah. Yeah, that's right. And I'm sort of seeing it is a convergence of time and prophetic call to then see things shift and move. And some people won't even notice the difference, but a lot of people will begin to start to recognize God shifting and moving, and a new way. And if we don't do it together, it isn't going to get done, because individuals aren't going to do it on their own. Which is why God wants to establish benches and 7s and 12s and 3s, and so that we do it together. We're not independent but interdependent and mutually submitted to one another, and respecting and honoring gifts and receiving that which we bring and add to the picture, because we're drawing from each other's gift and encouraging each other in it. And I love it. I mean, it's so refreshing from the old. I've been in the old, having to do everything. I've done jack of all trades, done everything, to keep things going, and it's so different when you've got people in their positions of authority and you just encourage them and release them and bless them, and it's just so different. It's just great, if people could taste and see, they would see that it's good, and they would leave the old in a shot, But we've got to help people taste and see, that it's good, So yeah, it's a good time to be, and
yes, sir.
yeah, so very encouraging.
Well, I got to move along.
Okay, no problem.
Thank you, Mike.
Okay, you're welcome.
Bye, Henry.
Okay, that's okay. We'll leave it there.